Hey there, CJ Math students. Today we're going to take the integer rules that we learned this week of SSAK, same signs add, keep, and DSSL, different signs subtract, keep the sign of the larger, and apply those to rational numbers, so fractions, decimals, etc. So let's do exercise number 1. Suppose a 7th grader's birthday is today. Happy birthday, Mr. Washington. She is 12 years old. How old was she 3.5 years ago? Write an equation and use a number line to model your answer. So place an arrow on 12. So first of all, let's go ahead and make this 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 years are right there. This will be year 1. So here's year 0, right? The length of the arrow is the absolute value of -3.5. So here's our problem, right? How old was she 3.5 years ago, right? So start at 12 and move 3.5 spaces left. So we're going to move to 11. We're going to move to 10. We're going to move to 9. There are my 3 spaces, right? But now where's my half space? Should end up right there. So I move to 8.5. So 12 plus -3.5 equals 8.5. Let's go ahead using the same thing here. Find the following sum using the number line diagram. -2.5 plus 5. So you would start at -2.5. Where does -2.5 exist? Well, it does not lie between 1 and 2. It lies actually between -2 and -3. -2.5 starts right there. So we can say, hey, this is -2.5. An interesting thing about this fraction is not only is -2 negative, but also the fraction is also negative. So this is really can be broken down into -2 plus a -0.5 gives me -2.5. Okay, so sometimes you guys see this 1/2 and you think, oh, that's positive. It's going to be really useful to know that it's negative when we start adding and subtracting these. So now I want to move 5 spaces right. So when I move a space, I'm actually ending up at -1.5, -0.5, +0.5, and so on and so forth. So I move 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 spaces, and 5 spaces, and I end up at +2.5. Find the following sum using the number diagram. 1 plus -2 1/4. So we're going to start at 1 and -2 1/4. So -2 1/4 is really -2 plus -1/4. So I could move 2 spaces left, and then I could also move 1/4 space left. So let's do that. Once, twice, I end up at -1. But now moving 1/4 space left, what is that going to give me? Think about that very carefully. So 1 plus -2 is -2, right? Sorry, is -1. But that extra -1/4 gives me, if I just move 1/4, it gives me -1 1/4. Find the following sum using -5 1/2 plus 8. So let's start at 5 and -5 1/2. So that's in between -5 and 6. And remove 8 spaces left. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. Notice how I end up in half every time I move 1 whole to the right. So what do I get? I get 2 1/2 positive. So far my answers make sense. It makes sense that my answer here is +2 1/2 because I have more positives. It makes sense that my answer right here is -1 1/4 because I have more negatives, and it makes sense right here my answer is +2 1/2 because I have more positives, right? All 3 of these problems were examples of different signs subtract larger. All right, so let's try and do -6 plus 5 1/4. So start at -6, and we're going to move +5 and then +1/4. So let's just move the whole numbers first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now move 1/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I'm moving 1/4, divided up into fourths, right? Does that mean I'm at -1 1/4? No, look at the 0. negative 1/4 would be right before the 0. Then it'd be negative 1/2. Then it'd be negative 3/4. And so that's actually what my answer is, negative 3/4. All right, what about negative 7 plus 0.9? So you can start at negative 7. And I'm not going to move one whole, I'm going to move 0.9. So 0.9 ends me up just in front of the negative 6. So what's that going to give me? It's going to give me negative 6. And then what's the first tenth behind negative 6? It'd be negative 6.1. Right? I could also say, hey, this is DSSL, so I could subtract, right? 7 minus 0.9. Well, what do I get? Oh, sorry, that's a 0 right there. I have to borrow here. I get a 6. 10 minus 9 is 1. 6.1. I know my answer is negative because I had more negatives. Negative 6.1. What about 2.5 plus negative 1/2? Now, hopefully this is where ST Math is going to kick in for you guys, because negative 1/2 you should recognize is the same decimal as negative 0.5, right? So really this problem is saying 2.5 plus negative 0.5. Saying you have $2.50, give away 50 cents. So you could start at 2.5, which is right in between the 2 and the 3, and then move left 0.5. So if I move left 0.5, I should end up on 2. I could also prove that mathematically by saying 2.5 minus 0.5, right? Different signs, subtract, and I get 2.0. My answer is positive because I had more positive. So this should be 2.0. What about negative 1/4 plus 4? All right, so I want to subtract different signs. So I can start here at 4, and if I move 1/4 left, maybe you can think of this as decimal again, right? Negative 0.25. If you had $4 and you gave 1/4 away, what should you get? $3.75. Let's prove it mathematically. We're going to do 4 minus 1/4, right? Because different signs subtract. Now, how do I actually subtract this? Well, I need to borrow. I need to borrow a whole. So if I borrow, that becomes 3 4/4 minus 1/4, and that's how I get 3 3/4. So just moving 1/4 to the left gives me 3 3/4, otherwise also known as 3.75. Moving on down. Samantha owes her father $7. Owing money is always negative. She just got paid at $5.50. Getting paid is positive. For babysitting, if she gives her money to the dad, how much will she still owe him? So this is different signs. Subtract larger. So basically I'm just going to do 7.00 minus 5.50. We know how to subtract decimals. We're going to do some borrowing here. This becomes a 6. This becomes a 10. I get 1.50, but then in your head you got to say, all right, different signs keep the sign of the larger. I have more negatives, so that's why my answer is she still owes her father $1.50. At the start of a trip, the car's gas tank contains 12 gallons of gasoline, so that's positive, right? 12. During the trip, the car consumes or uses 10 1/8 gallons of gasoline, so minus 10 1/8. How much gasoline is left in the tank? So I'm going to do also known as plus and negative 10 1/8, right? So how do I do 12 plus negative 10 1/8? Well, that's DSSL. Basically, I'm just saying, okay, different signs subtract larger. I need to do 12 minus 10 1/8. Well, how do I do 12 minus 10 1/8? No, you cannot just do 12 minus 10 and make that 2 and then your answer 2 1/8. Do not do that. Write this in big capital letters. You must borrow. So this becomes an 11. My borrow is determined by my denominator, 11 8 over 8, minus 10 1/8. Notice, this is still 12 because 8 over 8 is 1, 11 plus 1 is 12. Right? So we have 11 minus 10 is 1, 8 minus 1 is 7/8. In my original problem, did I have more positives or more negatives? I had more positives, so that's why it's positive 1 7/8 gallons. All right. Here, a fish was swimming 3.5 feet below the water surface, so that's negative 3 1/2 feet. 4 hours later, the fish was at a depth of 5 1 feet below where it was at 7 a.m. So he's going to go plus, he's going to go deeper, 5 1/4. Sorry, it's not looking too good. What rational number represents the position of the fish with respect to the water surface after those 4 hours? So at 11 a.m. Notice I didn't use 11 a.m., 7 a.m. Don't always just use the numbers that are in the word problem. You got to pick out the ones that are relevant. So basically, I just need to add here. Now, when you add, you need to make sure that you have common denominators. So I want to multiply this guy by 2 to get my common denominators. So it's going to be negative 3 and 2/4 plus negative 5 and 1/4. So when I add this up, this is an SSAK problem, right? Same signs, add, keep. So let's just do negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. 2 plus 1 is 3. And keep my denominator. So negative 8 3/4 feet below sea level. All right. Here, we're going to match the expression on the left with the expression on the right that has the same sum. So this would be smart to first calculate these sums out, right? That's SSAK, this is DSSL, this is SSAK, DSSL. So here DSSL 0, here SSAK 8, here DSSL 1, and here DSSL negative 13. So obviously those two match up, these two match up. That was negative 8, my fault. Those two match up, and those two match up. And finally, order them from least to greatest. So here we have negative 4 plus, this is actually 6 because you can add those together. So negative 4 plus 6 equals 2. 57 plus negative 10 equals positive 47, DSSL, right? Negative 3 plus negative 3 equals negative 6, SSAK. Negative 3 plus negative 9 equals negative 12. And 22 plus negative 4, DSSL. That does not equal 26 or negative 26. That equals positive 18. So least to greatest, that means the most negatives at the top. So it should go negative 12, negative 6, 2, 18, 47. And after this, please go ahead and do your BuzzMath level.